So first, I like to start with a little bit of a warm up. I like to start off with a little bit of a light jog just to get my muscles loose, get the blood flowing, so I can get later on into my stretches. Then I get into a little bit of high knees again, still warming up, getting my blood flowing, getting the heart rate up, getting my muscles ready for a nice stretch and a nice workout. I like to get into some butt kickers, just to warm up my quads, just to prepare them for the deeper stretches later on in my warm up because today's a leg day and I definitely want to make sure my lower body is nice and warm and loose so I don't sustain any injuries. After that, I go into some knee hugs, stretching out my hamstring, glutes, and a little bit of my lower back. And lower back is pretty important for leg days, especially when you're doing overhead exercises. You want that lower back stability. As I come back, I like to open up my hips. They're usually a pretty tight part of my body, and I like to have them nice and loose when I do legs. Then I move into some lateral lunges, make sure I get really nice and deep here, get a nice stretch, get my legs kind of ready for the nice deep squats I'm going to get into later on in the workout. Then I get into some zombie kicks, a little bit more explosive with this, trying to get a little bit of a stretch at the end, my lower back and my glutes. I just like incorporating this exercise, it feels good and just allows me to warm up a little bit quicker. And then to finish off, I like to warm up my upper body just a little bit because I will be lifting plates and other things and putting things over my head. And I want to make sure my whole body's ready to just lift weight and so I don't strain anything, being really careful here. And as I'm a baseball player, I want to make sure my rotator cuffs and my shoulder stability is always good. So these exercises and kind of warm ups help me keep my mobility and increase a little bit of my strength as well. The first exercise is barbell front squats. What's really interesting about barbell front squats is it's kind of a different play on normal barbell squats. Whereas having the bar on your back, you have it sort of in between your shoulder and your collarbone, and you hold it steady in there. And what this does is kind of takes the focus off your hamstrings and glutes and puts it more onto your quads, more of an isolating exercise. What you really want to focus on when you're doing this is make sure that you have the bar centered and that you make sure it's in between your shoulders and collarbone so it doesn't move and have any play, making the exercise a little bit easier for you and kind of easier to hold the bar. One important thing to note on form when doing this exercise is that you don't want your knees to go too far forward. Once they start going too far forward, it kind of places more weight on your toe rather than your heels where you want it. And as your knees go further forward, it puts more stress and strain on them, which could lead to possible knee injuries. And as you go heavier in weight, making it much more likely that you could hurt yourself. So you want to make sure you got that form down before you go up in weight and make sure that you keep your weight on your heels at all times. Now, one major benefit for this particular exercise in my sport is that it eliminates muscle imbalances. So let's say you only have access to doing normal barbell squats and you can't do quad extensions or other exercises to get the more front part of your leg. This could create a huge muscle imbalance. And as an athlete, having muscle imbalances can lead to injuries very easily, and especially in my sport specifically, it can very easily lead to injuries. So one important thing, like for example, if I was hitting and my quads aren't strong enough and my muscles aren't balanced, my hamstrings will be recruiting other muscles other than my quads to compensate for the inefficiency within my muscle development and symmetry. So for example, if I was hitting and my quads aren't strong enough, perhaps my lower back might come in more into play, my core, and other muscles that you don't want are kind of recruited during this motion because as your lower back gets into it in your core, it can cause lower back strains and other injuries. Where if you had a balanced leg, you'd be healthy the entire season and you wouldn't have to deal with these issues in your lower back. The second exercise is single joint barbell deadlift. It's a very similar exercise to regular deadlifts, although the one change that kind of changes the way it's done is that instead of sort of having that bend in your knees that you might be used to, you want to take that out and just focus on your lower back and really isolate it instead of having other muscles recruited as you do this exercise. One important thing you want to make sure is that your core is always strong and you have your shoulder blades back and your back nice and strong, and you don't want to have an arch. Once you get that arch, probably means you're doing too much weight, or you just need to work on your form, and that could really lead to lower back injuries. Whereas instead of getting what you want, the benefits out of the exercise to strengthen your lower back, you could just hurt it and kind of ruin all your lower back strength doing this exercise. So you really got to make sure you have a strong core and a really strong lower back and have your back straight during the entire exercise. So what you really want to take out is a knee bend when you do this version of deadlifts, just to isolate your back. And so the way this helps me in my sport is lower back is a very important muscle group when it comes to baseball. If you don't have a stable, strong core, including your lower back, doing most movements in my sport could easily injure you or strain you, and you could get sore very fast. In my sport, everything's very explosive, everything's very rotational, and if your back and core isn't strong enough to handle that rotation and all that explosive movement, it can definitely strain, cause muscle tears, um, soreness, strains, and that's something you don't want. So having that added stability and strength really helps me to make it through the season and have that extra strength and balance so that I can continue performing at 100% and not having to take a day off. The third exercise on this day is lateral lunge drill. Now we're getting sort of more out of core exercises and getting into unilateral, again, to get rid of muscle imbalances and give more muscle symmetry, giving a stronger base as an athlete. So the way to perform this exercise is pretty self-explanatory in the name. You're going to lunge, but instead of forward, you're going to lunge laterally and alternate between your left and your right leg, which is really important in this exercise. What you want to make sure is that you go out far enough that it's not too easy, but it's not too hard. You don't want to stretch out too far because it becomes more of a stretch and less of an exercise because you won't be able to flex your knee as much. So you want to kind of find the distance where you can go down to at least 90 degrees and get a nice burn and a nice deep stretch while you perform this exercise. So as you get into these more unilateral exercises, such as lateral lunge drill, you're sort of more focusing on one side of your body at a time. As it said in the description of the exercise, it is a unilateral exercise. So what this exercise will really do, again, will help me with my muscle imbalances in sport. And as I've kind of expressed throughout this entire video, is that in baseball, having muscle imbalances, since it's such an explosive sport, is really bad. When you have these muscle imbalances and you're recruiting other muscles that aren't used to being so explosive and having these fast twitch movements, that's how you get hurt. And that's why, in baseball, you're always working on shoulder mobility on all three heads of your shoulder, your medial, your posterior, and your anterior deltoid, and your rotator cuff, of course, to make sure that your shoulder is always stable. The same thing goes with your legs. You want both sides of your legs to be equally strong, symmetrical, and stable. And if you have this going for you and you have this strength, then you won't have that loss of efficiency when you play the sport and in your explosiveness and the higher risk of injury due to other muscles being recruited to compensate for the lack of strength or lack of balance. The fourth exercise of this workout is barbell step-up drill. So what this exercise essentially is you take a barbell, put it on your back, and choose an adequate weight for your strength, and you're stepping up on these boxes, and as you get to the top, you fully extend and squeeze your quad and get that nice pump in your leg. What you want to make sure when you do this exercise is that you keep your back strong and straight and don't hunch over, and that you take out the momentum. You don't want to use momentum off the ground, so as you see what I'm doing, as I get on top of the box, I stand up fully and get both of my feet on before I step back down, and I repeat this as I'm on the ground. I get both feet set and then step on the box. So you can't use momentum as a factor to make the exercise easier and really isolate your hamstrings and glutes, and it essentially is kind of copying a squat, so to speak, movement and isolation, except unilaterally in between both legs, which again will work on your muscle symmetry and balance and just making your body more stable in your sport. And again, as I've preached before, muscle balance is really important to kind of take away other muscles recruited into movements in your sport that could cause injuries. But also, what this exercise is really good for is glutes and hamstrings are the power muscles in baseball. And glutes, especially, are the biggest muscles in your body, give you the most power in your sport. And as you do this exercise, it kind of increases your explosive ability with your hamstrings and your glutes. Because as you step up, you have no momentum and you really have to push up so you can get on top of that box. And as you repeat this, the exercise can be quite tedious and hard and will really give you more of that fast twitch explosive muscle as you're starting without no momentum. And this is sort of similar to when you do box squats, where you sit down and take away all your momentum and explode up and make sure you get all the way to the top and back down, which takes away all of the added momentum and makes the movement and exercise much more explosive. The fifth exercise is the split squat drill. What you want to do is put one of your legs in a TRX band and perform the motion of a squat, however, with one leg in the air. And this is also another unilateral exercise which isolates your quad, hamstrings, and glutes. This really helps work on your balance and coordination and really muscular stability. So a really important factor to this exercise is if you really want to try and keep your back up straight around 90 degrees or perpendicular from the ground to allow you to have the proper amount of weight going towards the ground, because if you're leaning forward, it's going to put a lot of stress on your knee. If you're leaning back, you get a lot of extra stress on your lower back, which is something you don't want. And this exercise is really helpful to my sport. It helps a lot with coordination and balance, which is a very essential part for any athlete in general. To be considered athletic, you have to have some good balance and some good coordination to perform movements that are required in your sport. And the muscle groups, again, they're working lower half, which is really important for baseball. Lower body strength, without it, you can't really develop a lot of power, because power comes from the ground up. It starts at your feet and comes up through your arms in baseball. If you don't have a strong lower half, it's going to show when you release it with your upper half. The sixth exercise is a glute/hamstring bridge drill. Essentially, what you do is grab a med ball and you put your heels on the med ball, push down with your heels, push up with your glutes, and go up as high as you can until you feel a nice squeeze and a nice burn. What you should essentially feel the burn in your glutes and hamstrings, as why it's called a glute/hamstring drill. And what you want to really focus on with this exercise is that you try and get as big as a squeeze as possible. The bigger the squeeze, the better the stretch, which means you're doing more work. And this exercise is very good for my sport, and just if you are an athlete in general, it adds more lower back stability. It gives you stronger glutes, which again, as I've stated before, ground force is the most important part of baseball and many other sports. Everything starts from the ground up. And if you have a more explosive, stronger glutes and hamstrings and just a lower half and a more stable back, you're able to create more force from the ground. And this will aid me in my hitting and throwing, because when you get that torsion, that explosion from your glutes and your hamstrings into your swing and into your throws, you get that extra couple miles an hour in your swing and your throws. And this really allows me to kind of add more into my game and just be more successful and more explosive player, as well as maintaining my core strength and stability with the lower back added into this exercise. My seventh exercise is the med ball PNF raise drill. What you want to do is grab a med ball with a decent amount of weight. I have the 10-pound med ball here, and what you want to do is reach forward and touch the ground with your med ball. As you reach forward, you want to go down with your shoulders and your back, sort of like a deadlift, except on one leg, and use your lower back and glutes and hamstrings to pull yourself back up, reach up towards the sky, sort of shoulder press the med ball, and go all the way back down and complete a rep. And what you want to make sure to help yourself balance as you go down is you kick back your back leg so you can have a good center of gravity when you perform this exercise. As you can see here, I had a little trouble in the middle as this is a relatively new program to me, and as I'm getting into the season, I'm getting more out of strength training and more into higher reps and calisthenic workouts. So some of them with balance and other coordination factors in them, I'm still getting used to, and hopefully soon I'll have the form down and be ready with my proper workout for the season and be ready to go. This exercise really good for balance. Definitely, as you can see, I struggle a little bit, so obviously I need to work on my balance a little bit, and it kind of works everything. It gives you a nice light weight to work on shoulder stability as you come to the top and reach the top. It works on your glutes and hamstrings. It's kind of a very nice calisthenic workout with a little bit of added weight, and it will really help me sort of with my coordination and balance in my sport, because there are a lot of positions in my sport where you are balancing on one foot, such as, for example, I pitch, and on my drive leg, you're balancing on one foot, and if you have bad or poor balance and posture, it's very hard to have your leg lift and drive through the ball and stay balanced the whole time. So this exercise will definitely help me benefit in that sense. It'll also help me target smaller muscles since it's less weight and more body weight instead of the bigger group, so I'll have more support and stability overall and better maintenance. And this exercise will definitely help me stay healthier during the season rather than doing all the heavy strength lifts that I did in the off season, which definitely made me more susceptible to injury than doing these light, more body weight exercises as I get into the season. My eighth and final exercise is TRX side plank roll with a Bosu ball. Essentially what you do is put your elbow on a Bosu ball and go in a side plank with your feet in the TRX bands and grab a plate. I grabbed a 5-pound plate, and what you do is, right in the name, you roll in with your hand with the plate. So you bring your hand in towards your body and extend it outward and bring it back in and continue this motion. It's a very good oblique exercise with added rotational strength on your oblique rather than just the tension. Rather than just the tension of a side plank, you're adding in a couple of factors, such as the fact that you have to balance your elbow on the Bosu ball, keep your core locked in with your feet in the TRX, and you have to roll and twist and contract your obliques all at the same time. And it adds a whole new definition to this exercise of side planks and adds a heck of a lot more burn. Now, this exercise for my sport gives me a lot of rotational strength and power with the added core stability, since you do have to stabilize yourself and have a very strong core to be able to perform this exercise, as I've mentioned before. So, obliques in baseball, my sport, are very important because a lot of power and speed and explosiveness is rotational in my sport. Although you do come through, you do need some very good strength rotationally as well. And strengthening up the rotational strength of my obliques, well, it's at the same time strengthening its stability, is a very good and essential exercise for my sport and for my power and rotational strength. Lastly is my cool down. For my cool down, I do the same thing as my warm up, except less intense, with a little bit more time taken in between each exercise to get my heart rate down slowly. And then I perform these stretches as you see here. Because this is a lower body day, I do stretch up my lower body very well. I want to get my hamstrings back, my glutes, my quads, kind of all that flexibility back. And this is basically what I do for my cool down after every lower body day in my program.